So today we are here to discuss nations. So it's I got guest Kevin over here. He's becoming more of a regular than a guest anymore. All right, so we're going to discuss this game. It's interesting civilization building game. So we'll talk about that. But before we do that, make sure you hit that button at the subscribe down below because you don't want to miss any of these games coming up. And the notification bell so you also get told that you're not missing those games coming up. Also, if you happen to be going to Gen Con, we're going to be at Gen Con. So I think this will be played either while we're at Gen Con or be coming up to it. So catch us up there. We'll be running around. We got lots of t-shirts up there. Some t-shirts. So if you can hook up with us and play us in a game and actually beat us, then you will be able to get a t-shirt, assuming supplies last. So let's get into this. So as far as nations goes, this was released in 2013. It's got a Board Game Geek rank of 164, so it's pretty well revered on Board Game Geek. It has a rating of 7.6 right now. It is a 1 to 5 player game. It says it averages from 40 to 200 minutes. We definitely took the 200 minutes route. Yeah. It's definitely a long game. It is age 14 and up, and that's probably accurate. This is pretty complex. I would definitely call this a medium to heavy game. It's on the heavy side of the medium to heavy.
I agree.
As far as the designers, apologize in advance for any of these names that I mispronounced. Rustin Hawkinson and Nina Hawkinson, Einar Rosen and Robert Rosen. The artists were Ossi Haikala, Jere Kassinen, Paul Lane, and Frida Logdeberg. And it's published by Lautapeli.fl. So, that's all the stats on it.
Right.
All right, let's move on to quality of components. So you get a very flimsy player board, very
flimsy. Yeah.
So make sure you have a sturdy table beneath it. There's two central boards. These are bowed really badly when we got them out of the box. And there's the box, the way it's designed when it comes, there's two end pieces and a big open area in the middle where all of the pieces that come in the box are stored. So these over time have sunk in the middle. It's not the greatest design in the world, but it doesn't hurt the game that much that they're bowed like that because all you're doing is moving your tokens around the perimeter, but it could. I mean, it could. Right. As far as you've got wooden cubes, wooden meeples, they're not the standard shaped meeples, which is kind of interesting. A lot of cardboard for different resources. Yeah. The card quality, the cards actually do have a little bit of a linen finish. They're really small cards, but there are a lot of cards.
A lot of cards.
Yeah. There's a score pad, and there's some more cardboard for a solo play game. There is a die. I assume that must be for the solo play game because we didn't use it at all.
Yeah, I think it was. Looking at the tiles that they give you for the solo play, there was a die picture on there.
Okay, so it must be solo.
Yeah.
All right, so as far as the component quality, I think I'm going to be at, there's a lot of it, but the quality is no better than Catan. I might give it, just because of the volume of it, give it a 5.25 maybe, but that's about all I'm going to go.
Yeah, I wouldn't go much more than a 6. I think there's some quality in some of the cardboard, and the cards, but that the board coming out warped was kind of
it detracted.
Disappointing, but yeah, I mean, other than that, the pieces are pretty standard and but good. So,
all right. As far as the theme, I mean, it's a civilization building game. It is definitely very generic.
Yeah.
It's different nations. So each player board represents a different nation, but there's really no feeling of that nation in any of the player boards. I mean, we played with the balance.
Basic.
The balance. But even when we flipped them over, it didn't feel like there was that much of a difference that fit the country that I saw.
Well, I was looking at China. That's who I was playing, and they did have an extra person, so fitting the population size. But yeah, I think there. I wouldn't say I felt a lot like, oh yeah, this is totally China.
Yeah.
But there isn't a lot to it.
Yeah, it definitely doesn't sway that way. And in the cards, it all depends on which cards you get, because you're not getting cards that are thematically the country you're playing. That's by any means. You're picking from the country. One of the things that threw me off on the theme, I think, is that some of the cards were in eras that didn't seem to be appropriate. Like we had a samurai in the same era that there was a red coat. And I was like, this makes no sense why these two would be in the same era. At least from my knowledge of history, the two were totally different eras, but I'm no history expert. But yeah, it seemed very odd. And I did get a laugh, though, that the only business I saw in this entire thing was the Ford Motor Company. It was just thrown in. It's like all these generically named things like aqueduct or hydro plant.
And apparently it's a wonder.
Yes, it's a wonder that the Ford Motor Company was built. I was like, why on earth did we just have one company and it's actually name by name? So that was pretty funny. But I mean, all in all, the art is meh. It's not great.
Yeah.
And I just didn't feel like this felt like you were part of, it's this civilization. I mean, it's definitely got the engine building of the civilization builder, but I don't consider this to be thematic at all. I'm probably a 5 on this too. I just don't feel thematic.
Yeah, I think you're approximately right. Again, I think I would probably go a little bit higher to about a 6, as it is a building your nation, so it's not going to necessarily be towards the single nation that you are. But the things do seem like you are building up your nation. They have stability and they have military and things like that, which I think definitely plays into a nation's longevity.
Yeah. All right. As far as the rule book, this is where it really suffers. The rule book. It's first of all, it's a not an easy read. It's 24 pages long. It does have a nice cover on it, which I always like to see. It's got like a short blurb about the idea of the game and how it works. A very short introduction, but it's not even enough to call it flavor. Right. Components. There's a lot of pictures, thankfully, in the book to make it faster than what a 24-page read would be. But we had to reread several sections over and over
just to make sure we got it right.
Yeah, and then we still didn't. The concept of the circles and the squares having different meanings on when you got the income, that was kind of threw us for a bit.
Right.
It's in there. I can't say it's not in there. It's definitely in there. It's just something you're going to gloss over when you're reading because there's so much material. And then you're going to have to come back and look at it and realize that if it's got a square, you get it immediately. It's not, like the circles that you get later on when you do produce. And then
there's typos.
There's typos all throughout this book. Most of them don't hinder your understanding.
Right.
There's a few that are on the player boards that actually do, and that's there's one that just says it gives you a bonus of 1, but it doesn't tell you what it gives you a bonus of 1. What and what is bonus that
one?
Yeah, it's one widget, I guess. I don't know. It's just there's a lot of vagueness, and we didn't go online because it was really late. Yeah. But if we were playing it, we would have to probably consulted the oracle of internet many times during this game to get it 100% correct. But I think we got the gist of enough of it, and I'm pretty sure we weren't far off if we were off from the understanding of the gameplay. One of the big factors in the game was the whole, the fact that the offsetting of the scales when we were doing the what's the scales called? Stability. Mm-hmm. That one we didn't catch on until about halfway through the game, and that really affected things. It's mentioned in here, but it's not elaborated upon well.
It's not stressed or anything.
Yeah, so it's really easy to miss that. Mm-hmm. And that changed the sway of the game in my favor big time whenever that was discovered. So yeah, it's definitely was a learning game, and it was a painful learn.
A long learn.
So if you enjoy heavy games, Euro games in particular, and enjoy civilization building, not like where you're actually fighting each other, but there's military in this, but you're not actually
fighting one-on-one against each other.
Yeah, this is definitely a brain burner. So if you don't mind that kind of game, and you don't mind that the rule book is not sufficient to teach the game, this might be the game for you. I'm going to give the rule book, I think, a 4 is where I'm at. I mean, it has a lot of material. It is laid out nicely. The typos were not detrimental, but the fact that it left out so many points that were so important to the game and didn't flesh it out enough. We had to learn through context as we played, I think.
Right. Yeah, Randy was sitting here reading it to me, and I had to say, will you reread that for me?
Several times we had to stop and reread. Either I was stopping it and confusing myself as I was reading it, or one of you guys was pointing out, wait a second, what does that mean?
Yeah, so I think that's a fair assessment.
Yeah. All right, so moving on to gameplay. So this game, there's a lot to it. We'll kind of run through the overall steps that you take, but we're not going to flesh out all the details because there's just too much of it. There's basically 3 major phases in the game. There's the maintenance phase, the action phase, and the resolution phase. And you play those each round. And you play through 4 eras during the game. You can play. It says there's recommendations if you want to take a shorter game, but it's 4 eras for the standard game, and you play 2 rounds in each of those eras. So you're going to go through basically 8 rounds in the game. There's each of the eras. At the end of the era, there's a scoring phase that's part of the resolution phase that is basically just giving victory points for your knowledge collection. So at the beginning of the maintenance phase, you're going to move to the next round. That's easy. You're going to refill the progress cards. This is the centerpiece of the game, is these progress cards. This is how you build your civilization out. So this board is normally filled with cards. It will have, depending on number of players, which columns you're going to fill in. But you're going to have the option to buy the cards for either 1, 2, or 3 coin, depending on which row they're in. And then those cards will go onto your player board, depending on what type of cards you bought. Some of them are basically a one-time use that you spend immediately. But most of them go on your player board. But your player board's designed in such a way you can only store so many of each type of card. So if you're playing the standard board, because each of the player boards is 2-sided, one with a standard game and one with the advanced game. The standard game, everybody has 5 building spaces for either buildings or military. You can make any combination of them, but you have 5 building or military spaces. You have 1 space where you can have an advisor, and that person basically gives you a perk that is specialized for you while they're in play. You have 2 colony spaces where you can conquer with your military force cards, but you still have to pay for them.
Yes.
Everything still has to be paid by coin, but you have to have the military strength as a prerequisite in order to buy those cards. And then you have a wonder development space. So you can only have 1 wonder that's being built. But each of those wonders you have to hire architects for, and that's what these little brown cubes are for, which those come into play based upon event cards which are put into play each round. And then when you build a wonder, it goes into your built area, and it becomes an ongoing effect perk for you as well. So you can have 5 of those. So those are all stored on here, and they all come from the progress board. Then you have an optional growth, or you have a growth action, but you can choose what that growth is, which I thought that's probably my favorite aspect of this game.
I did like that.
Yeah, I thought that was really neat because it's a way for you to get more workers, but workers come with a penalty because it's a severe penalty too. You basically either have to give up 3 on your knowledge track, stability track, or You have to pay an additional 3 food to feed that additional worker.
Right, a three food upkeep every production round.
And early in the game, you don't produce that much.
No.
I mean, that's the thing. You have to assign the worker, and if you pay 3 food, but you only get net 1 food back from them,
right,
it's hard to justify that worker. So there's 8 of them out there on your board that you can acquire, but it's just kind of a misleading thing because you think, oh, I should be grabbing these people, and I got one the entire game, and I basically grasped at straws to get that one. Because the thing is you make that choice on what you're going to grow before you get to see what the event is, and the events can cost you lots of food because they have a famine on them, which the famine at the end of the round you have to pay food for every round. And then there's also 2 events on a card. It's not just one event, it's 2 on the card. And if you suffer penalties in those, which is basically usually military related, but sometimes it's also stability related.
Yes, usually the one is military, and then the second one is stability.
Right.
And so those are like,
and they're kind of almost competing things because you can either allocate your meeples to one or the other. So unless you have all those meeples unlocked, you almost have to subdivide. You can't. You got to choose. I'm going to specialize in doing the stability track, or I'm going to specialize in the military track. So you really are going to suffer one of those penalties probably every time, unless you can middle of the road it somehow and avoid both. But I think that's what Caleb's strategy was, trying to avoid both of those. He kind of stuck in the middle. You were military track most of the game, and I was early in the game. I was nowhere. I was nothing.
Well, I mean, I stayed pretty high on both those things, but I felt like the events really didn't affect as much as I was expecting it to.
Well, I think it did until we discovered the stability.
That the stability negated like all the penalties of the event, which to me was like, what?
Yeah.
Why have all the penalties if you could just negate them?
So, but I did like the event cards because I thought they were neat. I mean, they were... The fact that you had to kind of blind go in, not knowing, so you had to prepare some of your stuff. I built up early in food thinking I was going to be suffering from it. And later in the game, it was getting a little tighter on food, but food was not nearly as big of an issue as I thought as it was going to be. Then after that, we flip the event and we see what those things are. We don't have to face them yet. You don't face the events until the very last part of the resolution phase. Then we reveal any architects that come from the event cards, because you have on the event cards, it'll tell you if you put 0 through up to 3 new architects into play.
Right, and they're so essential for building your wonders, and they become very scarce.
Yes,
very quickly.
So then after that, then you have the action phase, and this is really the meat of the game. This is where you're taking all your actions. So your actions don't really involve your workers directly. They're indirectly affected. Right. Your actions are based upon your resources, which is mostly your gold and your stone in this place. Right. So you're spending gold to acquire cards that you're going to put into play. Or you're spending stone to assign workers to cards. And the cards have a cost on how many workers you can assign, or how much stone it costs to assign the worker. And then the cards themselves, if it's a building or a military, are going to adjust your stats. So they're going to increase your levels on the military track if it's military, but also the military comes at a sacrifice. You have to give up a good of some kind. It's so it's a trade-off. And also you're giving up production in those goods because they don't produce anything, the military. Right. And then the buildings are all about producing things. So they give you production and all those different things. But again, you only have 5 spots, and there's actually more resource goods out there, types, than you could possibly have on those cards. Yeah. So I kept writing, it's like, if I've got an excess of this, I'm going to shift everybody over to this other thing. So I don't need, because I've got enough food to last me for a while. I'm going to shift to the money. So I was not used to playing that way. I'm used to trying to max everything. Right. And you cannot do that. No. Because the only way to max all your production is not have military. And if you don't have military, you're going to be hosed.
Yeah, military also determines what turn order you're in. So it's something you can't just ignore. because being third place, well, although
Yeah,
you were
stink.
third place,
I was
most
third
of the
place
game,
most
but,
of the game.
but
Yes.
you still won.
Yeah,
but that's
I had to
because
be
of
strategic
yeah.
on my card buying, though. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Is, you know, if you're first place on the military, you get to be first on the card drawing for the next round, and that is a big advantage.
Big advantage.
So I had to be like, okay, I know they're going to grab these two cards, so what can I get? And what's the best? It felt like, you know, I just did fantasy football drafts, and that's what it felt like. It's like, okay, I know I'm going to be third round here, so I know I'm going to get what's left over after the first two picks. So I'm going to optimize my third pick, you know, except for it doesn't snake like the fantasy football does.
Right.
So, yeah, that was, you know, an interesting aspect of the game was being, you know, that the fact that the military track was so important as far as turn order that impacted your card purchasing.
Right.
So you on your action phase, you can take one of three actions. You're buying a progress card, as I mentioned. You're deploying a person to the track, or you're hiring architects. So the architects that we put out based on the event card, you can buy one of those with stone, and the stone is driven based upon the number that you have to pay is based on the type of, or the wonder you're buying, because the wonders will have different prerequisites, or not prerequisites, but costs
yeah.
for each one of the different
It's always
cubes.
stone, but it's a different amount of stone that you're paying. So
yeah, and each of the wonders will give you different types of perks. So I thought that was really cool. I love variety in cards, and we only played with about a quarter of the stack, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, you got a lot of cards in there.
Yeah,
and you're not going to see most of the cards in the decks because you're only dealing with. Oh, what did we have? 15 cards in a era. Well, I guess that would be approximately 30 an era. But you've got, like I don't know, 60 cards.
Yeah, because we took all the advanced. There's two levels above what we've had. There's intermediate and advanced, and we took those all out.
Right.
So we were playing with the basic cards.
Most basic. Yeah.
So I'm excited to. I like games that give you that, like Agricola, where there's multiple tiers of cards. I like games like that, and this one has that.
Right.
There's a lot of growth in this game. There's then after we all pass, so you keep going, just like in Terraforming Mars and many other games where everybody has to decide to opt out of bidding, or not bidding, but taking actions in this case. And you flip your card over, kind of like if you're at a Brazilian steakhouse type place. Flip it over.
I'm done with the food.
Yeah.
No more, please.
Except for you can't flip it back.
Don't bring it around anymore.
So you flip it over when you're done, and you're out for the round.
Yeah.
And then everybody can keep going. And that was a strategic advantage several times.
It was.
So Caleb held out a lot of times on us. And that was a really cool strategy,
yeah,
I thought.
Many times I wished I could hold on, and I'm like, I can't do it anymore.
Yeah. I bought a few cards just to try to outlast people. I had no use for them, but it was like, okay, it's cheap. I got an extra coin. I'll buy that card just so I could stay in. So, like, similar to Mars, because I sometimes will sell one card at a time just to stay in the round. So that was interesting. So then after everybody passes, we move into the resolution phase. So the resolution phase, this is where, first of all, you go through production, where all your cards that have red circles on them,
with a worker.
Yeah, with a worker assigned to them. For each worker that's assigned, you produce that amount of goods. And it's coins or food or stone.
Or there's that cost if you're military.
Yeah. Or, if it's black circles, they cost you during this phase for each person that's in those. Then you have the player order you adjust based upon the military for that round.
Right.
And then after that, if there's any wars that were purchased. So one of the things that the military can do to really hose the people who are not on the military track high is you can trigger a war. You can only have one war per round.
Right.
And that war will go into effect, and everybody knows it's there. But at the end of the round, you have to match whatever the military strength is at the time of that person bought the war. Mm-hmm. So you mark their strength with a little black disc, and then everybody has to reach that. Or if they don't, they pay the penalty that's pictured on the card.
Right. And
no matter what, you've got to pay the victory point loss.
Right. But the other loss it can be mitigated by stability.
Yes.
And your stability isn't affected by that, which to me,
it was my only saving grace during this game.
It made war to me less desirable.
Well, the other thing it does is it makes people try to compete with you for the military. That's what got you on the first time. You put one out early in the game.
I played it too soon, and I couldn't build my military up higher, but everybody else could. And so they passed me on the military, and I'm like, oh, well, that's okay. Now they get to go before me, and I don't have the first player advantage anymore.
Well, that's the thing is, we all had military cards, but I hadn't allocated any resources to them because I had, I was trying to build up production, and I'm a pacifist in these games usually. And so, when you forced my hand, then I suddenly shifted all my stuff. I had enough stone, thankfully, to trade it, to move everything.
Right.
So it was, but it is an interesting dynamic that's in the game about the wars in there. But it offsets some of the pacifist nature of the game.
Yeah.
But the thing that we somewhat didn't like, I would say, I don't know, we were mixed on that.
Yeah, I think
was the offsetting with the stability. It seems a little powerful.
Yeah, I mean it's a neat idea.
Mm-hmm.
But once the war hits, I feel like some of us felt like the stability should be affected. Maybe mitigating the things, but affecting the stability. But there's no way to really do that mechanically and still make things make sense.
Yeah. So basically, you still lose victory points. You can't take that away.
Victory points.
But any of the resource losses from the card, you can offset by your strength and your stability. So it basically is a deduction from that cost.
Right.
So once you get a really solid, strong stability in your area, there's not much that can affect it. I mean, you can opt to affect it by taking workers, because each of the workers, you're either spending 3 food or you're spending 3 on the stability chart.
Right.
So that is really where it offsets it. I chose to not get those workers.
Right.
That's how I maxed all the time. But the next effect is the event triggers. So that's just when we pay the piper with all the events. And usually giving perks to the people who have strong military and then strong stability.
And penalizing those who didn't.
Right.
But again, the penalties will usually be able to be negated by stability unless it's a victory point penalty, which do happen.
Mm-hmm. And then you have the famine where you're just paying the food that's on the card. Mm-hmm. And then at the end of every second round is the end of the era. And at that point, whoever is furthest on the knowledge chart gets to get a victory point for every person behind them.
Right.
The person who's second gets one for each behind them, and so on. So whoever is last gets no victory points. And I will tell you, this is a very low-scoring game.
Very low-scoring game.
So that was actually key to me winning the game, because I stayed on top. I never looked back on the chart. There was one time you caught up with me.
There was a time where I caught up, and then he just
pulled ahead.
No.
Yeah, I think I was one ahead of you on there.
And I was like, oh, man.
So, but I got 2 victory points from Caleb and Kevin, looking at my tail end.
One, and I'm like,
And I almost lapped Caleb until he decided to get books in the very end.
At the very end.
I lapped him. I almost lapped him. I got behind him, but So once I was that far ahead, there was no catching up. But that was, we played that's 2, 4, 8. 8 victory points. 8 victory points. Because it's 4 rounds, 4 eras and 2 per era.
Yes.
That was 8 of the victory points I won with. So it was a pretty big swing in the game, because my score in the end was 36 points.
Yeah, not to mention, not only do you get those victory points at those times, but at the end of the game, for every 10 of those books you have, you're going to get another victory point.
Oh, yeah.
And that's 10 of every resource.
Every resource.
And it's not just a single type of resource. It adds up all your resources, and every 10 of any of your resources nets you a point.
Yeah. So, and one of the things we didn't like about the game is the cards, they have victory points on them that you get if you allocate workers to them throughout the game. But they got no stronger as you got more eras into the game. You had to pay more for the car. Well, you had to pay more stone to get workers assigned to them, but you got no more victory points for them.
Yeah, there was not a huge increase of victory points. Like even in the wonders, like the fourth era wonders, still many of them were only one victory point.
Yeah,
and you know it's like, why am I really what's happening that? So I think that's one of the things that hurt the theme.
Yeah,
is that you're progressing, but you're not seeing that progress except in resources that are coming.
Yeah, I didn't understand because like there was a lot of production buildings still in the era of the fourth era, but what good are they?
But why?
Yeah, because I mean, especially in
other than points,
the second half of that era during the last round, you're buying them. You'll get a little production at the end, and that could give you some 1/10 of a point for each one. But
it would have made more sense for it to be a point difference instead of a production difference.
Exactly. It would have made more sense for you get 4 victory points per person who's assigned to them instead of 1. I mean, I did not understand that at all, and I won based on that, but I still disagree with it. I think it should have been worth more. And we did see. I think you saw a 3-point.
I saw a 3-point wonder that I wasn't able to finish because I took too long to build it.
Yeah, well, that's the other thing is you're in the last year. It's harder for you to finish those.
Yeah, because you've got a limited amount of architects.
Yeah, and you don't know what's going to come up on the events. Yeah. So, I mean, would make more sense if the last eras were worth more victory points because it's harder to build them.
Yeah.
But yet there was no more victory points for most of them. You had a 3-pointer. That was the only one I saw.
That was the only 3-pointer
I had a 1-pointer. So did Caleb.
I went through the cards, and there are some more, but but like we said, you're only going to see a small amount of the cards from the whole deck. So I mean that's kind of nice, because it means that there's more chance for different experiences each time. But it's also frustrating.
Now what they do make up for it a little bit is if you did develop a lot of workers. The later rounds have more spaces for scoring victory points on those cards, so there are more opportunities to score points.
Right, it's
but
just getting those workers, taking those penalties to get those workers. You got to figure, is that going to be worth it?
Because especially since you got to produce enough stone in order to move them.
You got to produce enough stone to move them. You got to produce enough food or stability to pay for them.
Yeah,
and it's just
there's just a lot of things for you to max on this game, and it's hard to do them all.
It is.
I won't say it's impossible because we only played it one time. We won't know
we've only played it the most basic.
Yeah, but I constantly felt like I was losing even though I was winning. Because I was not producing much stone, or I was not producing enough coin, and I felt like Caleb was dominating on all the production.
It looked like he was, but apparently that didn't pan out for him.
No, he didn't care about the book chart at all.
Not at all.
Completely ignored it, and that's what cost him.
Yeah.
So as far as a score on this, it's tough because I really like a lot of it, but I really struggle with a lot of it too.
I agree.
As far as the amount of time we invested in this game, I think I'm probably about a 7. I don't think I'm much higher than that.
Funny enough, that's what I was thinking. I was thinking a 7 because, it feels like there's potential.
Yeah.
Especially if you maybe play with some of the additional things, some of the differences in the nations. And so, I'm where I think I would play it again to see how it feels, if it got any better. But it was enough for me to say, okay, I'll do it again. But again, it is a lot of time.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of that time was spent on learning because the rules were so not well.
The hard thing for me is anytime there's a long game like this is I got away. It's like, okay, I could have spent this time playing Terraforming Mars. And it's like, it's really hard for me to justify when it's a game that's at a 7 or below as far as ranking. I don't mind this game. I would play it if other people wanted to play it, But I'm definitely gonna, if I haven't got the amount of time to play what we played for this, I would rather play Terraforming Mars.
Right.
And there's very few times where I would be not in the mood for that, or Fortress America, or Axis and Allies, or
Right.
Battlestar Galactica if I could get the people. You know, I mean, it's like there's so many good games that are out there that are better than this, and I don't ever get to play because I don't have 4 hours to sit down to play a game.
Right.
So I'm with you. I would play it. It wouldn't be my choice. I would not pick this game.
Right.
So any last thoughts?
I mean, for a Civilization game, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's okay. So
I struggle with that. I got to be 164 ranked.
I'm sure.
I mean, it feels like I'm missing something.
Maybe there's something that we're just not getting about the game. But yeah, I think I don't understand how it's that high either.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's our assessment of nations. Hopefully you enjoyed it. And if you have any difference of opinion or any opinion that matches, go ahead and comment. Or if you think we missed something, let us know. We'd love to know because we struggled with this one, that's for sure. All right. Hopefully we'll see you again. Hopefully we'll see you at Gen Con. So I'll talk to you then or at Gen Con or on here again. All right. Bye.
Goodbye.